Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Jessica Del Mar. This is the Oneness Podcast. In this episode, I want to talk about something that's sort of been forming with these past few episodes, which is love. We've been talking a lot about love. We had a whole episode regarding the power of compassion and another episode about the frequency of love being adaptability. If you haven't yet listened to those two episodes, the power of compassion and the frequency of love, which is adaptability, go listen to those two episodes first before listening to this one so that you can get the full experience. In this episode, I want to talk about allowance and acceptance. And what's been coming through is Spirit has been showing me this sort of trilogy, this triangle energy of love, meaning not love necessarily as an emotion or what we feel towards another person, but love as an energy, as a frequency, as a vibration that works behind the scenes, if you will. It is that guiding force. It is that interwoven web that connects all things. And it is connected to our greater source, our greater God, but is a frequency that our greater source or our greater God emits into an experience such as the human experience or the earth experience, where everything is connected and we are able to see evidence of all of that connection. But anyway, so this trilogy energy of love being adaptability, compassion, and allowance, and we'll speak more about that trilogy in this episode. Compassion sparks the desire for change, but change cannot birth forth from a state of resistance to what is. Compassion teaches us that change is birthed forth from holding a space that allows expansion. When we force change from a space of contraction, then the change we are desiring is constructed through resistance. Change through allowance and acceptance means that we are able to see things for exactly as they are. And even if we may not agree with it, we honor it for exactly as it is because it exists. And we cannot deny that it exists. And in our state of honoring what is, we open a state of allowance, acceptance, and receptivity, which is always a space of expansion. Holding this space of expansion is what then invites the thing we are honoring, whether we agree with it or not, to step into the space of expansion as well. Many things we do not agree with maintain its hold in our experience because we hold it in a space of where it is. This is sort of suffocating in nature. The more you suffocate something, the more that it is or even devolves or even starts to wither away, right? It doesn't expand into a positive potential, but it more so descends into a negative potential as you smother it. So that's essentially the energy of holding something where it is and not allowing it to expand, not holding the space for it to expand into. And we do this all the time. You might have some things coming up for you. Control is a big thing. Control is us holding things exactly how it is and wanting to control how what is comes to be. It's controlling all of the moving parts. But that's a form of suffocation as well. Seeing someone in a negative light and keeping that version of them in your minds, that's also holding someone in a space of where they are. Even if they have the ability to change, if you're not able to hold the space for them to move into that change, then you're holding them in a space of what you don't like about them. That's also a form of energetic suffocation too. Holding something you do not want in the space of where you do not want it only creates more of what you do not want. But When you integrate acceptance, you are seeing it for what it is. You are acknowledging its existence in wherever it may be, whether it's something good or something bad, whether it's something you agree with or not. But you're also honoring its existence for playing a role and teaching you what it needs to teach you in that moment. And then you are setting it free. This is where the big release happens, the letting go. When you set something free, you are in a state of allowance. And this is where the magic can really start happening because you're not holding so tight to something that you do not want. All the forces of the universe are working through the web of interwoven species. All life is connected. And the more that life is able to lift into the space where connection grows and expands, the more that life can change towards the direction of growth and expansion. The more that we act as compassionate and allowing beings, the more that we give space and room for life to grow, expand, and evolve. People are going to say, well, if there's something you dislike and desire to change, then you must take action and push against those that are keeping the things that you dislike alive, right? We see this all the time. Politics, any form of duality really, is one side pushing up against the other side, trying to enact change from a place of resistance. And what we say is that we cannot deny that change through fear is like a blunt force. Even if the forces of resistance are strong in an active way, it only leads to a surplus of people who act from a state of limitation and feel from a place of disempowerment. The change they fight for may be rooted in a positive expectation, but the act of going about it is something rooted in negative exploitation. So it's almost impossible to have a positive outcome in the space of a negative action. There will always be repercussions of the misalignment of energy somewhere along the line. You are human beings, but you must let go of control. In many instances, much of the problems on your planet are rooted in control and power. How is a power struggle going to fix a power struggle? So, in the shift and evolution of humanity, a softening must occur in the way that humans treat each other. But it is never about others. It always starts with you. You are the one who chooses to battle or allow. And many people will interpret allowance as giving in or giving up, but it is quite the opposite. Allowance is a calling forth of the powers of the universe to move through all components, like the wind moves through all things. You're allowing the powers of the universe to move through all components of what you are desiring change in. And in the power of universal calling, a shift occurs from wherever it was intended, meaning the one who intends is the one who shifts. So the level of your intention, however open or closed it is, or however in allowance or resistance it is, will determine how the forces of the universe work in your favor. When you intend from a state of resistance, you do not allow the magnitude of the forces of the universe to work for you. You cork it off. Instead, you rely more upon human control to create the change. But when you intend from a state of allowance, you grant full access for the forces of the universe to move and send ripples of energetic frequency to determine change in alignment to what you ask for. Now we understand that there are some things in the world that are much bigger than changes you desire in your personal lives. The changes you desire in the world takes a collective effort because it was created forth from a collective effort. But all change starts with you. As you shift your world, you begin to shift the worlds of those around you. And as their worlds shift, they shift the worlds of those around them. Everything is connected, and energy spreads like wildfire through this interwoven web, much like a breath initiates first from the nose, but quickly spreads through the whole entire body within a matter of seconds. all feel it one way or another. Start with simple things. Allow for the universe to work in your favor. And to do this, you might have to first be so aware in your recognition of where you have been resisting the universe from working in your favor or pushing up against the universe from working in your favor. So first, that resistance needs to soften in order for you to fully allow and fully trust in the allowance of the universe working in your favor. The reason why I personally trust this to work completely is because I see evidence of it all the time. When there is no attachment to outcome, but simply allowance for change in your favor, is when the change comes about very, very quickly. When you're not trying to control something, but rather allowing for the change to happen, trusting that it will happen, it happens very quickly. There are so many times when I see something that I want to change. The desire for this change comes forth from a compassionate place. I hold it as an intention. I see it where it is right now, without resistance, without fear. And then I see it where I want it to be. I speak it into the change I am looking for from a place of, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if this changed to this? Or if we saw things done this way instead of this way? Wouldn't it be nice? It does not start from a positive expectation, but it may naturally flow into a positive expectation in the sense of, thy will be done, and so it is. Right? Those holy words, thy will be done, and so it is, as promised by this greater source of our universe, this greater God. So that's the positive expectation, knowing that thy will be done, not in terms of your human control of wanting it done, but in terms of a greater good creating the change. And so it is. Then I let go and I say, universe, it's in your hands now, right? I can't control it. I allow for the universe to take charge of how this change will go about. And so it really doesn't take much effort, but it does take compassion. Your compassion behind the desire for change is what sparks that greater intention to flow. And if you allow that greater intention to flow, then all parts of the universe come together, all forces of the universe come together in all the different components to make things work. And the next thing I know, things start to change. I've seen it with my own eyes, small things to larger things, way too many times to count or keep track of over the years. All I know is that every time these desired changes take place, not from the place of force or desiring to control, but from a place of compassion, it takes place to serve my trusting in the universe, to reinforce my trusting in the universe, in God, in this greater network of energetic forces that work for our greater good. And compassion always leads us to our greater good. Therefore, compassion is a powerful tool to cultivate change towards our greater good. I don't want to take up too much time on this podcast, but I do talk about two examples of this sort of change coming through very quickly for me in the past that I share on my newsletter when I share the written transmission of this podcast that came through. So go ahead and read it in my newsletter. I talk about one powerful instance, which always I come back to, at a coffee shop. And another instance of almost like instant change was when I was staying at an Airbnb and the neighbor had a horse on the property. And so there was a lot of compassion there and desiring for things to change for this horse that almost came about instantly when I had that desire pulled forth from compassion. So go ahead and read those examples. But these types of things always happen with these compassionate desires. It shows us that change can happen very quickly if we allow it the space and room to grow. And change on smaller scales always leads to bigger change. Even changes that you may not feel is connected to anything important, like very mundane changes, it's always connected to something important or something much bigger. So opening space and being in the fullness of where you are allows you to see all of the ways that change can be made for you right here and now. And when you're able to fuel that force of inner empowerment in your every single day, you can then guide yourself to desire change on much greater levels without the resistance to it, but with the allowance of a much greater force. So what often happens is people don't witness or feel the empowerment of change happening for them on smaller scales in their everyday lives. And then they go forth wanting these big changes to happen in the world and fighting for these big changes to happen in the world. But it's almost like trying to run before you can walk. It's a little bit backwards. We're being taught in every single moment to be present with where we are right now so that we can observe and be fully in the presence of who we truly are and be witness to all of the miracles that are unfolding for us right now, all of the manifestations of our intentions that are happening for us right now, all of the changes that are happening for us through our intentions, through our compassionate nature happening for us right now. So once that momentum starts taking place for you in your every single day, then it adds more momentum for you to then desire change on much greater scales, much greater levels, even collective levels, and do a lot more energetically, like allow for those changes to happen. If you're desiring change on a collective level, right? Maybe in your community, maybe in the world, because you see something is wrong, you see something's not working out for the greater good. If you have that intention on a greater level, but in your own personal lives, you think that nothing is ever working out for you, things aren't ever going the way that you want it to, there's so many things that you wish you could change, but nothing's changing in your personal lives, then there's a mismatch of energy there, right? So Spirit really wants you to recognize that everything always starts with you. Feel how change is magnificent and magical within you and that it's happening all the time. And you have the opportunity to make that change happen on all of these everyday small levels to then ramp up how you can create and add momentum to the change on much greater collective levels in terms of changing the planet and changing the world. So this sort of rounds out this trilogy of love. Again, it showed me this triangle of adaptability, compassion, and allowance and how they feed into each other for this greater good of love, this greater frequency of love. Adaptability is the force of love that always holds the potential of our experience and for us to move into different levels of potential. Adaptability is like the ladder that is always there for us to climb. We are never stuck in one place, but can adapt to anything we desire. Allowance is like the container that holds the ladder of adaptability. So it is essentially that infinite container for the ladder of adaptability to exist within. Adaptability stretches as much as allowance gives way for it to stretch. If allowance is restricted, then so is our ability to adapt. The more that we allow, the more that we can adapt. The more we allow, the more we reveal positive potential to be realized through adaptability. Compassion is the force that we as human beings hold to cultivate change. It initiates desire for change. It leads us into areas of life that show us who we are. Compassion is the movement up or down the ladder through experience because it grants us insight into how we move from suffering into ease and vice versa. Compassion with allowance is what expands our ability to climb the ladder into positive potential, which is suffering into ease. Compassion with resistance, on the other hand, is what sinks us into lower potentials, which is from ease into suffering. But all is love, because the frequency of love is unbound in either direction and always serves us. How we utilize love can be for both ease and suffering, because love does not judge. It grants us space to discover and adapt to who we truly are, even in the midst of who we are not. Allowance is the space that always exists for the change desired by compassion to take place. Allowance is the element that fuels adaptability, because allowance is the container of infinity. The more you allow, the more adaptability is able to stretch. The more adaptability is able to stretch, the more compassion we are able to feel in our infinite nature. The more compassion we're able to feel, the more we are able to grasp where change is headed. And the more that we can grasp where change is headed, the more we must integrate adaptability to get there. The more we integrate adaptability, the more we must sink into allowance so that we can expand into the change instead of resisting it. Love is what generates our ascension. Love is a machine of moving parts coming together to show us who we are, while holding space for us to discover all of what we know, while also being open enough for us to keep expanding what we believe to be true. Love is both a gentle breeze and a force to be reckoned with. And while we will never know the true magnitude of love, we can certainly call upon it to show us who we are and what we are capable of every single day. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to receive this podcast as a written transmission, sign up for my weekly newsletter. I send all of the written transmissions through the newsletter. The link is in the description of this episode. Thank you again for being here. I'll see you in the next episode. Oneness, love, and peace be with you.